My name is Deborah Treisman. I'm the fiction editor at The New Yorker, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 11th Annual New Yorker Festival and to tonight's conversation with Lorrie Moore. We'll be talking up here for about an hour, and then we'll have some time for questions from you, so be prepared for that. Please turn off your phones. Please don't take any photographs. And I've been asked to inform you that if you are planning to tweet about this event, you should use the hashtag TNYFest. So no tweeting without the hashtag. In her story, How to Become a Writer, Lorrie Moore wrote, "Why write? Where does writing come from? These are questions to ask yourself. They're like, where does dust come from? Or why is there war? Or if there's a God, then why is my brother now a cripple?" I think it's safe to say that you will never find a story by Lorrie that asks such direct questions. And yet by the time you get to the end of one of her books, you feel you have the answers. Moore is one of America's funniest writers. She's also one of our saddest. Her comedy is sharpest when she's writing about disaster, and she's her sense of tragedy is never stronger than when she's writing about people trying to have fun. As The Guardian recently put it, her subject matter is the laughter of funerals and the tragicomedies of love. She deals with the facts of life in all meanings of the word, from love, sex, food, to war, sickness, and death. She's the author of 3 novels, Anagrams, Who Will Run the Frog Hospital, and most recently the best-selling A Gate at the Stairs, as well as 3 volumes of short stories, several of which we've had the honor to publish in The New Yorker. Please welcome Lorrie Moore. See, you only have to follow me. You don't have to follow Jason Schwartzman.
That's right. That's right. Well, this is welcome to the red herring. We can do anything we want now. We have a sort of musical sort of backup act if the Q&A starts to sort of wear down.
Yeah. If things go wrong, just ask us to sing. I'm going to start at the beginning. So when you were 19...
Oh! That beginning.
Not quite the beginning. When you were 19, you won a 17 magazine fiction contest, and that was your first published story. When had the impulse to write first hit you? Were you writing as a child? I think your father and your grandfather both wrote. Was it something in the house?
Oh, I was writing as a child. I'm still writing as a child, I think. I don't know. You know, I always wanted to win the art contest in 17 magazine. I was one of those, provincial upstate New York girls, and I would get Word of the World from 17 magazine, which was this big glossy thing sold in drugstores. And they had an art contest, and then they had the fiction contest. But I never entered the art contest, and just, when I was just eligible finally to enter the contest, I entered a story instead of any artwork, and it was the first thing I'd ever sent out, and it came back with a $500 check. And I thought, well, this is really going to be easy. And nobody would publish anything I wrote for about 10 years after that. But so it was a slightly, it was a red herring of sorts.
$50 a year is not bad.
Yeah, and it continued sort of in that vein, yeah.
But you'd been writing in high school and thinking about
it? Well, I did what the English teachers wanted me to do. I wrote the stories and all that they assigned and the creative writing assignments, and I loved to do them. But I don't know. I'd love to do a lot of things. I love to play the piano and play the guitar and memorize Neil Young songs and stuff. So it was all part of. Is this okay? The microphone?
I think you're fine.
Okay.
Can everyone hear?
Yeah.
Good.
No. Oh. I can feel things. I'm sort of wired up like. I got wired up by Lester Freeman or something backstage there. And see, there's some wireheads in the audience. I hope you can hear me. Where were we?
You said once, not to quote you to yourself, but that part of your talent for writing came out of your capacity for solitude. Is that something that...
I said that?
You still have a capacity for solitude?
I do. But you know, I was talking to my sister today at lunch, and I was saying, you know, you can't carve solitude out of loneliness. You've got to people your life. You've got to have a life that's sort of really rich, and that suddenly gets annoying and irritating, and then you carve your solitude out from there. And close the door and do your work, and then you open the door and come out, and there your life carries on. But and she said, that's an interesting point. See, that's what sisters are for. Anyway, it's been something I've been mulling over, because of course the capacity to be alone, the capacity to work in a solitudinous fashion is key to any artist's life, and writers do that, and I had a capacity to do it as well. But I also had, when I was growing up, a kind of noisy house that I would escape from, you know, closing the door and listening to records and writing things, and, you know, just closing the door on all that.
And then at some point you decided to do an MFA at Cornell, and this was back at a time when it wasn't maybe quite as trendy as it is now to do an MFA. So what...
Is it trendy? That's not a good word.
Seems like everyone's doing it.
Yeah. I was reading an article in the London Review on the plane. Did you read that piece?
No.
It's a critique of MFA programs, but she keeps referring to program fiction. And that's to her, I mean, I don't know, it was a phrase I'd never heard, but she's from England,
it's
I guess.
It's English, yeah.
Yeah.
Those English.
Program
they have
fiction,
program fiction, we have MFA fiction.
And it's program fiction with 2 M's and an E.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I thought of MFA programs at the time as being a kind of support system, as a kind of cafe, as a place that would somehow provide you with an environment that you couldn't afford on your own, because MFA programs, the best ones, support the writers that go there, and so I just wanted to do that. That was always in my mind. I had a teacher in college who had an MFA from Iowa, and so I knew that there was this option. I think MFA programs also democratize the opportunity to write, which is a phrase I've said before. It sounds really kind of, I don't know, kind of bumpy as I say it, the democratization of the opportunity to write. But that's really the main part of what it does. It allows you to write if you're poor, if you can't afford to quit your job, and need someone to sort of be there as a safety net for you to quit your job and take 2 years and write. So that's what an MFA program was for me. I had been working in a law firm here in New York for a couple of years before I went to Cornell.
And then you came out of Cornell, and at 26 you published your first collection of stories, SelfHelp.
Oh, no, I think I was older.
The record says you were 26.
The record says that?
Yes.
The record also says this is an exchange. Which I assume means that I get to be literary editor of the New Yorker after all this. And you get to go back to Wisconsin and teach creative writing. My students are really looking forward to this, especially me being literary editor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my fact checkers tell me that 26 was the age you were.
I think
even if it was 27, it was very young.
It actually came out when I was 28.
28.
I think. I signed the contract when I was 26.
Oh,
there you go.
That's what I saw. Okay. We'll exchange that.
I signed the contract for the book at 26. That's young to be signing contracts. Yeah.
Was it a shock to be published so young? How did you How was the response? How did you cope with it?
How did I cope with selling 7,000 copies?
7,000 is not bad.
And that was after 5
stories.
printings.
Yeah.
That's true.
They reprinted 5 times. That's all you need to say.
Reprinted it 5 times and managed to
Forget
sell
the number.
7,000.
Just say reprinted 5 times.
The last printing was only 800 copies. I said to my editor, I said, well, the next printing will just be pages 1 through 85. But they did very small printings.
Yeah.
How did I cope with it? I don't know.
People were reading you.
It was so long ago.
People were reading you, and that for the first time.
They were?
That must have 7,000 people read you. Did that?
I didn't, but I was off in Wisconsin, so I didn't know anyone was reading me at all.
You were already in Wisconsin then?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah. Well, that book was sort of a theme book, and it had this concept, which was the title was SelfHelp, and each story was structured as a kind of not necessarily a parody of self-help, but of using the language of self-help manuals to write about other things.
Right.
How did you come up with that idea?
I probably stole it, knowing me. I think it was a voice that I had seen already in a lot of poems. The second person is used all the time in poetry. The second person is used a lot in short story writing as well. I think Michael Cunningham had written a story very early on that I had read that I thought was beautiful. And I noticed that the poets would sometimes leave the you off the sentence, and that when you did that, the verb was in the front of the sentence and was really quite strong and powerful. And I thought, you could write a whole story like this in the imperative. It would be kind of the mock imperative, how it would be pretending how to, when in fact it's how not to. And so I wrote one story like that. It was called How. And I was in graduate school at the time. And then that voice just kept cutting a groove. And I went back and I wrote another one. And then it was how to do this and how to do that and how to be whatever. And I thought, oh my God, am I never going to get out of this voice? And I wrote 6 stories like that. And then I was done. That was it.
Yeah. Well, in that book and a lot of what you've done since then, you were, tell me if I'm wrong, it's an exchange, you were grappling with, quite directly, with the lives of women in America and with the lives of women in this society and challenges they face. I think you said that book was about feminine emergencies.
I said that?
I did my research, Lorrie.
That's good.
Do you feel it as sort of imperative to write about women in America? To sort of
I certainly
lives?
did when I was younger. I really did feel when I looked out into the literary landscape that there weren't enough, stories about and by women in a real way. There were some that you could point to and that I loved and all of that, but I felt there should be more. And so I felt a kind of calling to do that. Mm-hmm. And I did, in fact, wonder at the time, I thought, what would cause a young man to write a story? Because they look out into the landscape and there's all these stories by men. What would, why would they even bother? Why don't they go do something else and make way for us gals? But I did feel that. I feel that less now because I feel the world has changed and there's lots of women writing, and sometimes I just love to hop into the consciousness and mind of a male character, and I've done that a number of times, which I did not do in my first book, but I started to do in books after that.
Is it easy?
It's fun. It's fun to be a guy. I like being a guy. You know, I like being a guy for 25 pages at any rate.
Do you find it harder to do that voice, or is it?
It's not a voice, it's point of view. I really don't know how to do the voice. I've never written in the voice of a man. I have tried, and I really had a hard time doing it. But I can write in the point of view, so the story has its own voice, but it's hovering close to the point of view of a man. And so you're tracking his imagination and his feelings and his experience, and that's fun.
Yeah. Well, you did that in the story Debarking, which
Right.
is what I'm thinking of specifically.
Right.
That story and also your new novel, A Gate at the Stairs, deal with another serious subject, which is what it is to be living in America post 9/11. Not dealing directly with 9/11 necessarily, but how that changed our life. And is that a subject you felt driven to explore?
Well, I think all writers are writing, you know, in response to what they think are the important themes of their time and their country and their world. And it's hard to run away from certain things. But usually, you know, especially if you're in Wisconsin, things kind of come up tangentially, you know. They're not usually directly in town. But in Madison, we have had a history of terrorism. We've had, you know, we've had things happen in Madison too. So I think all writers want to sort of include the things they think are real and interesting about the world they live in. I never felt I was writing directly about 9/11 at all, but. To me, it seemed that you were writing about what happened to the mindset, to sort of one's mindset in daily life after 9/11, not necessarily about what happened in New York. But, yeah, I may have done it by accident. I mean, I actually, in the novel, you mean, or the story?
Well, both of them, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess they're kind of...
in different ways.
Right. Debarking is really less about 9/11 than the build-up to the Iraqi war and about a guy who is just, first of all, he's been divorced, he's trying to date, and then the war is starting up, and it's just making him crazy, the way it really made us all crazy in 2003. And so I thought that weird combination would be interesting, and I hoped it wouldn't be insulting or diminishing to put all of that into one character's life, because it really was coexisting in people's lives. You know, the news, you know, your own personal life, and you know, it was all happening at the same time. Right. So I wanted to do that. The novel was really more interested, I think, in the ways in which soldiers are called up a little bit. I mean, to the extent that it was about war, about how young men are called into war by older men. I also saw a lot of my students who were in the National Guard getting called up and for the Iraqi war, and I found that very alarming, as did they. You know, so
a lot of writing students in the National Guard.
Undergrads.
Yeah.
I mean, we could, you know, reservists.
Yeah.
But the reservists were called up.
Yeah.
The reservists were called up. I mean, it's really something no one expected, that a war would be fought by National Guard reservists.
Right.
But it was. So.
Well, on the subject of Madison, you grew up in Glen Falls, New York, and lived in the city and various places, and then when you were, I don't know, 26, 27, 28, you moved to Madison to start teaching there, and you've lived there ever since. I
did move once.
You went back and forth for a while.
Yeah, I did. I lived there for. I moved there when I was 27, and I taught for a year, and then I went to the chairman of the department and said, I'm losing my mind, I have to leave. Can I take a leave of absence? And he was very nice, and he said yes. So I got a moving van and packed up, and I moved to Hell's Kitchen. Good plan.
Where it's fine to lose your mind.
Hell's Kitchen in the 80s, really nice. But I actually was so happy to be there. I really loved it. Until I didn't. I was there for a couple of years, and I was going, for a couple of years I went back and forth. I would go back to Wisconsin. They were very nice and tolerant of me. I went back for a semester, would teach, and then come back to New York for 8 months. So I had a kind of, my version of a bi-coastal relation, bi-coastal relationship or bi-coastal lifestyle, Hell's Kitchen, Madison, Wisconsin. It's the poor man.
And you chose Madison.
It's the poor man's bi-coastal life. Right. Yeah, I did. Eventually, I realized my cat hated it here. I'm thinking of cats now because this light, brings out all the cat hair. It's really scary.
They can't see it out there.
The hotels, because they're afraid of anyone seeing bed bugs, the lighting is so dim. So you don't see the cat hair, and you put your makeup on in this harem-scarum way, and then you go out into the lights like this, which I haven't seen in a long time. And then I had a job in Madison. I had a boyfriend in Madison, and then I finally thought, well, what am I doing here? I should go back to Madison and marry the boyfriend and buy a house and have a kid and do that. So I did that. Got that over with. And, yeah. What else do you want to know?
How much is Madison part of you as a writer? How much of Wisconsin is part of you as a writer? Do you feel very identified with that?
I do, but they don't. They don't.
Don't worry about them. This is about you.
I'm very much treated as an outsider and as a New Yorker.
After 25 years?
Yeah. Isn't that strange? It's a little strange.
Sort of like Japan.
You know what? I said that in the English press, and then they printed it, and it looked really, really racist and weird.
Sorry, I take it back.
I said it's like Japan, where if you're not there for generations, they treat you as an outsider. And there it was in the Scotsman. Oh well. The Scotsman always gets people in trouble. Isn't that the one that got what's her face fired? Samantha Power. Yeah, Samantha Power got fired after the Scotsman got hold of her. Is this where we go into our Loch Lomond?
No. This is where you talk about writing about the Midwest.
Oh, writing about the Midwest. Well, there's much to write about there, and there's much that I think is interesting there. And of course, a college town is always weird and eccentric and not typical of the state. And so I'm never out of ideas. I'm just out of time. But there are a lot of come visit.
I did.
That's right.
I don't get any credit for that. You're never out of ideas. Where do the ideas come from? It's the dreaded question. How much do you mine your life for ideas? How much are you simply observing and drawing from what you see around you?
You want percentages?
I want you to tell me any way you like.
Well, it's always a combination. It would be boring just to write something that you've already lived. Yeah. It would just be boring. But you can live something or encounter something or see something or hear something and get very interested in it. And, then you start to write a story, and you're borrowing from this and you're borrowing from yourself. It's all a mix. It's a collage.
Yeah.
It's a collage, and that's the only way it can be fun for the writer, and also be important and not casual. I mean, you can't have a casual interest in something and make it work. It has to be a very personal relationship to it. On the other hand, it also has to be something that you're discovering, that you're bringing your imagination to, or otherwise it's dull to do.
Now, you've written 3 novels, you've written 3 books of stories. You're sort of evenly divided between the 2 forms. How do you know which one you're going to do when you sit down to write? Do you prefer one to the other?
That's where you get out the contracts and see which one it is you're supposed to do.
That's not true. You've written stories in the middle of working on novels.
That's true. Thank you for noticing that.
If you hadn't, we would have had nothing to publish.
Them. No, thank you. Thank you for publishing them. I don't know. I can feel the impulse to write a story always, and feel that it's not a novel. And when I start to feel I'm getting an idea that needs a longer treatment, then I'll sort of start collecting notes for a novel. But I have 1 novel per decade. It's not really. I'm not busy as a novelist. I have more stories.
I'm going to quote you. You once said that the novel is like a marriage and the story is like a love affair. Do you love your stories more? Are you more passionate about them?
I don't, I said that once and somebody said, "What is your marriage like?"
It's like a novel.
Because my marriage isn't like a novel. I don't know. I actually, finishing this last novel, I really love the process of a novel, because you just keep going back to it, and it's there. It is like in a way, it's like a marriage. You just, you walk into your study. There's your desk. You say, "Honey, I'm home," and you sit there and you work on it some more. And you do this over a period of years. The characters are still there. The setting is still there, and it's really a beautiful thing. A short story you struggle with over more, a shorter period of time, and it's more, I don't know why I said love affair. I don't even think I've ever had a love affair. But it seems like that's what a love affair would be, something really quick and intense and beautiful, and then it's done. And then you never see each other again. And that's the way I feel with the characters in a short story. I think, goodbye, good luck to you. I'm never seeing you again.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what I meant.
Yeah. I thought you liked doing short stories.
I do.
Makes it sound not so great.
But when I'm done with the stories, I don't want to see those characters again.
Yeah.
I would never start up another story with the same characters.
So you've never had a novel start as a story and then...
No, I never have had that. No. No. I know lots of writers have that, but I don't. It's very clear to me, usually.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's a difference in the actual writing and the actual sort of intensity line by line?
Well, you might be a little more worried about pacing and time and all of that with the story, and you might stretch out and get more leisurely in a novel. It depends. Yeah, it depends on the novelist. It depends on the short story. But in general, writing is writing, and your sensibility is your sensibility. Yeah. You're just trying to bring the characters and the setting and the particular story you're trying to write about forward. Obviously, with a novel, you feel you can stretch more.
Your writing is funny? Often?
Funny, haha.
Funny, haha, often. That's not something that's very easy to do. There are very few people who can write funny and still and not be writing humor pieces. How hard is it for you to do?
I think a humor piece would be very hard to do, actually. I have great respect for humor pieces. I know humorists don't like to be called humorists, actually. I think they feel it's kind of some lower level of writing, but I think that's very hard to do. I don't know. For me, I feel that the world is essentially very funny on the surface, and the underlying facts are really horrifying. So it's very easy when you're telling a story to sort of imagine the texture of something that would be really, really funny to include. The things people might say, the awkward little moments that would make you laugh. But underneath every story, the facts of life and existence on this planet are really, really difficult ones. They're really hard.
You're the only person I know who can be funny when writing about cancer and death, and somehow you manage to bring those things in.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. I always think that when life events sort of knock you down flat, that you can't write at all, and that's just, it's just too hard. But as you start to pick yourself up and brush yourself off and pull the cat hair off the trousers, then you start cracking jokes. And it's true for everybody. Someone falls down. Initially, they're like, but as soon as they start getting back up, they start making a joke. I mean, even Ronald Reagan was making jokes in the hospital after he was shot, but probably not making jokes right away. Even he, Mr. Showbiz, needed a half an hour to sort of start cracking his jokes. But there's a way in which processing a bit of trauma, but feeling that that you're going to survive. It's sort of an instinct. It's a piece of resilience, is what it is, and that humor comes out of that. People crack jokes all the time at funerals, and because it releases tension, and it's also about recovering in a resilient way from something that's knocked you down.
You have a particular affection for puns.
Oh, I don't know that that's true. I think I get accused of that more than I should.
You in those first stories in SelfHelp and some of the stories after that, you wrote, as we said, you wrote a lot about sort of young women grappling with society and with dating, with character forming and so on. And then later you've written quite a lot about children and about motherhood. I think you said that A Gate at the Stairs was a little like The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland.
You did do
I
your
did,
research.
that's written here.
Yeah.
And you've also written for children. Do you foresee writing for children more?
No, I don't. But
That's
then,
something that
if you want to know what's going to happen in the world, just ask me what's not going to happen. I'm a very bad predictor. I said absolutely no way would Ronald Reagan be elected, that kind of thing. So I don't envision myself writing more children's stories, but you never know.
What was it about A Gate at the Stairs that makes you compare it to Alice in Wonderland?
Well, I was thinking of the way of the sort of traipsing through the Midwest quality and the encountering of grotesque characters. It's shaped more like it's shaped more like a journey, the way Alice in Wonderland is and the way The Wizard of Oz is, as opposed to shaped like a Henry James novel where forces press on each other and something erupts. It's more going down the road, the way Alice did, the way Dorothy Gale did.
The sort of innocent girl at the center.
Yeah.
Encountering.
Yeah. And in The Wizard of Oz, it's a Midwestern girl, so.
Yeah.
And I did name her Mother Gale. Nobody noticed but me, but you know, those are the kinds of things that amuse writers at their desk.
So back to Madison. You've been teaching for 25 years, right? Something like that.
Oh, even longer, I'm afraid.
How is teaching for you? Has it had an effect on your own
You'll find
writing?
out. This is an exchange. I think you're going to like it.
Welcome to editing. You're going to like that too.
And yeah, and when my students send me their manuscripts, as I sit in your chair in the office, how is teaching? Teaching is fine.
Does it have an effect on your own work, teaching writing?
I wish. No, not really. Mm-hmm. No. It does, in some ways, it can make you more self-conscious. It can, I mean, initially when I started teaching, and before there were spell checkers, teaching just wrecked your spelling, because you were just reading, see that teacher here, because you're reading all these misspelled things, and then you start to write your own stuff, and it's all misspelled as well. And you're like, you forget how to spell. I mean, the most simple words. You're suddenly thinking, does disappointed have 2 S's in it? You know, you just suddenly get, you know, you lose your bearings. But now there's spell checkers, so there's things like, you know, she combed her hair, Hare, you know, with a, I don't know, I'm trying to think, with a peak, P-I-Q, I don't know. But early on it affected the writing that way, and even now I think, well, if one of my students did this, would I allow that? Or, you know, it raises your self-consciousness a little bit, and raises the bar. I have great students. Mm-hmm. They're really nice and smart and fun. They're really nice people.
Do you feel like you've formed anyone?
Formed anyone? No, their parents have done a very good job. They've done an excellent job. No, I'm only there as a kind of editor and cheerleader, and you know, and I'm there to sort of say, pay no attention to what Caitlin just said, you know, because Caitlin, because sometimes they listen to each other too much, so I'm there for that. But no, they're almost too, you know, they're almost too nice. Mm-hmm. You just do start to worry that somehow we're creating this whole generation of literary people who are so damn nice. You know, whatever happened to the Bill Burrows of America, you know? But I don't know.
Yeah. When you write, are you writing for any particular audience? Do you have anyone in mind?
I have you in mind, Deborah.
Set myself up for that one.
I do. You know what? You probably have no idea, but every writer in America is going, what is Deb Treisman going to think of that? I don't know. I'm just going to barrel ahead here.
Start singing. Time. No, seriously.
I was serious. I don't.
Do you imagine a reader? Do you think about who's going to read it?
I imagine the perfect reader, who of course doesn't exist except you, my dear. But
Okay, I'll take your next story.
I think it's going to be too long.
No.
I don't think it'll fit. Oh well, we'll talk later. I don't have a group of people I show my work to, which is probably unusual. I think it's a good thing to do that, and if there are writers in the audience who are wondering whether they should do that or not, if you can get people, it's a lot to ask of people to read, read my work and tell me what you think. That's a lot to ask, and I've just never dared ask anyone to do that. Except I did do it with this last book. I gave it to 2 literary friends who were terrific and had things to say. It was good. But if you have people you trust and you show drafts to them and you have some kind of arrangement, that's a good system to have. In general, at least for most of my writing life, the first person to see my work has been my literary agent.
Who is an excellent reader.
She's a very good reader, but she gets paid. She gets paid to say nice things to me, so why wouldn't she be my first reader? So, but, you know, the ideal reader, of course, is somebody who, once you're really done with the story, completely gets it and understands it and has the experience that you wanted them to have. And that's not everybody. You know, you cannot write for everybody. Not everybody is your ideal reader. So and you don't really know who your readers are until, you know, they come up to you and tell you, or they send you a letter. You know, you can suddenly, you know, have a conversation with your readers that way. But if you can get a few people who get what you do, and no one likes everything that a writer does. You know, every reader has their favorite books of a writer, and I'm the same way with the writers I admire. And but if you can get a few people to sort of get it, have the experience you want them to have, and that the book wants them to have, I mean, that's the best you can hope for.
Even if it's 7,000.
7,000, yeah, 7,000 readers. You know, I didn't know what to think of that when I was 28 and sold 7,000 copies. I thought, 7,000 people bought my book. I can't believe it. And I thought, 7,000, that's not very good. Or there probably were old libraries, I don't know. But I thought, who could these 7,000 people possibly be? But, and then of course the next book only sold 5,000, so I thought, whoa, I've lost 2,000 readers. At any rate, yes, as you know, you can't please everybody. That's what every writer has to know.
Yeah. You've mentioned that Alice Munro is one of your literary heroes. Who else would be in that category? Is there anyone else who's had an
No one's in a
you?
category with her. She's in her own category. She's just so great. But there are books by a lot of people. I mean, now I'm thinking of all the Canadians in honor of you, because you're part Canadian, sort of. You lived in Canada.
I lived there for 8 years, yeah.
So we'll do Canadian.
I never got citizenship, but I'll accept part Canadianism.
Yeah, I loved Margaret Atwood when I was first starting to write. Just loved her style, especially her prose style, which is a style that she really worked up, I think, in her poems. She started as a poet, and I don't know. I could just list writers. Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, I think, is one of the great novels of the last 100 years. I really do think that. It's a great, great novel. The movie's a bad movie version. Don't. I can say that now that the director of it died. Right? I hope there's no relatives in the audience. But actually, that director is a great director and did some lovely films, but that was not one of them. But it's a great novel, The English Patient. So.
What do you recommend that your students read?
Right now, I recommend that they read the work of whoever's visiting that semester. So this semester we have Ethan Kane and Mary Gordon coming. So they're reading The Emperor of the Air and The Palace Thief, two wonderful collections by Ethan Kane and Mary's collected stories. So.
There's been a recent, brouhaha in the media over Jonathan Franzen being hailed the great American novelist. And quite apart from whatever you think of his novel, the people came out and said a woman writer would never be called the great American novelist. And some people mentioned you as an example of who should be. And why is Jonathan Franzen on the cover of Time and these various women writers aren't? Do you think it's true that we would not, that this culture wouldn't anoint a woman writer in the same way?
I don't know. You know, I have to say, I think John Franzen handled that response very well. He said, it's true, women don't get the attention that they should get. And I thought, really? Because I have male writer friends who think that women get all the attention, that the bestseller lists are full of women, and that, it's, so I don't know. I don't have the research or the stats. I don't really know. Our Nobel laureate is Toni Morrison. Right? We have another fiction writer who no.
I didn't do research on that.
No. So that's our Nobel laureate, Toni Morrison. So I mean, I don't know. I don't. I suppose I have a dog in that race, to use an expression, but I haven't put the dog in the race because I don't really know enough. I haven't given it enough clear thought. And I don't really know when the brouhaha starts to come up. I don't even really know what people are talking about. Basically, their blogs are talking to each other, and I don't know if we're talking about being on the cover of Time magazine. One part of me said, "Oh, Time magazine must not be doing very well. They're putting a writer on the cover."
It's okay. They had a pelican on the cover, so and a bulldog. So why not a writer?
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you feel as though in your life, being a woman who writes a lot about women has ever stood in the way of people's response to the work?
That being a woman has stood in the
that being a woman who writes about women to a great extent has ever sort of affected how people read your work?
I don't know. Again, I'm not out. I don't know. I'm not in the media like that. I don't have a blog. I'm just living in Madison.
Are you tweeting?
No, but the
I have a
chancellor of our
hashtag for
university does that. Do you tweet? No. I can hardly say that.
Margaret Atwood
tweets. She didn't just do that for her book tour, she continues to do it. Wow. She what? Does Jane Smiley tweet? I think she has a blog, Jane Smiley. Oh, I don't have that much to say. No, I don't have that much to say. So I don't know, if somebody would have to, I mean, it's up to, if someone wants to complain about the gender thing, I mean, you can't just go with hunches and feelings and your own personal story. You have to sort of get out there with the stats. Here are the prizes, here are the sales, here's the money numbers, here's the and I don't have any of that. And as far as I can tell, nobody who is talking about it has it either.
Yeah.
But that's, if someone does that, then you just look at the numbers. And
yeah. I think it's difficult to look at. You can look at how many people are published, but you can't find out how many people are trying. That's the.
Well, you would know that, wouldn't you?
Well, actually, I would say that when I started at the New Yorker 13 years ago, probably about 70 to 75% of the manuscripts I got were written by men, and I would say that now it's probably
Really?
about
50-50?
55-45 maybe.
55%. So it's still the majority is men?
Still more from men, but getting close.
Now, how do you explain that? How do you... Yeah, what's your theory? This is good.
How do I explain it?
Yeah.
I think more women are taking time to write and considering writing a career than were doing it 20 years ago.
But when we look at MFA applications, it's not more men than women.
It's evening out. But maybe it was 20 years ago.
The men have more courage to send their stories to the New Yorker than the women. Maybe.
I think that was definitely true in the past. But you know, we just did this 20 under 40 project.
Right.
And, when we did it 11 years ago, 5 out of the 20 writers were women, and this time 10. So there has been a shift.
Right.
And not through conscious effort, but simply by what's out there and who's writing.
Right. Right.
So there's definitely been a shift.
Right.
That I've seen.
Well, I have a sense that there are a lot of women writing and writing terrifically, and but it's curious to me that it's not 50-50 yet at the New Yorker for submissions.
Well, we're waiting for the older generation to, move out.
Get out of there.
Yeah.
So it's the old guys.
The old guys
are still sending in their stuff.
Oh, well, on that note, I think if you don't want us to sing, maybe we should open up to questions from the audience. And there are microphones there, and it would be great if whoever has a question could step up to the microphone, since we're taping.
Oh, these brave people. You're so brave. I would never do that.
I really don't want to be first. Yes. But, so I thought of this very early when you guys were speaking. You spoke about, well, it's actually interesting because you came back around. We were talking about women writers, that when you started, you felt that there should be more room for women writers. And it reminded me of something I read recently about readers, and that so many more readers now are women, and that men are not reading as much as women.
They're not reading as much fiction.
Yes, fiction. That's
They're reading
correct.
more nonfiction.
It's fiction, yes. Yeah. So I'm an English teacher. I teach high school English in the Bronx, and I have a very hard time getting my boys to be interested in whatever it is we're reading. And it's something that really concerns me and saddens me, and I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts or ideas on how to get the boys interested. Especially, we just read Oedipus, for example, and the boys loved it because there was.
They did?
They loved it because it was like exciting, and there was sex and gore, and they were happy. But we're going to be reading Pride and Prejudice, and I'm a little concerned that they're going to be not coming to class. So I don't know.
I think what you should do is keep a list, because I have a teenage son, and he's not a reader either.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, and when I was starting to read to him when he was little, I noticed the really girly bent to a lot of books by for children, and he was most interested in stories that mirrored his life and somehow that could then get him thinking. And so he liked the stories about guys in school. Actually, Judy Blume, when he was little, he loved the Judy Blume fudge books.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some fans. He loved those.
Yeah.
He loved books about animals. There was even a Joyce Carol Oates picture book about a kitten. He just loved that. And then he loved as he got older, he loved Sherman Alexi's, Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Loved that. And I think that's a book that, have you taught that to boys?
No.
Teach that to boys.
Okay.
The boys will love it, right? There's people nodding. No, it's a book, but I think what we need to do is make a list of what works for boys, because there aren't a lot of books out there I think Pride and Prejudice is not, unless it's the one with the zombies. It's not.
So you don't think there's any way to sell it then, no?
To be in the business of having to sell it,
That's all I do.
my son was complaining that he had to read Young Goodman Brown, the Hawthorne story, and he wasn't going to read it. And then later he was bragging that he had aced the quiz without reading a word, which is, that's the kind of teenage son I have. So, but I looked at that and I thought, oh, I don't know. That's a hard sell to teenagers, you know, when you have when you have Sherman Alexie to sell them, don't let them read Nathaniel Hawthorne when they get to college, you know. I mean, don't try to force this stuff early because it'll just turn them off. I think that's what happens. There's a kind of set curriculum and people say, well, you've got to teach this much Shakespeare and this much Hawthorne, and you know, and then the boys get turned off. But instead, just give them the books that excite them. Good luck with Pride and Prejudice.
Thank you so much. I'll do it. Don't worry.
We'll alternate sides. So do you want to go?
I was just wondering, what's the most startling thing you've ever discovered about yourself while you were writing? And you
While I
know,
was
if
writing?
if it's too personal, you can say it's none of my business.
I'm not in a process of self-discovery when I'm writing. So if I'm discovering anything about myself, I don't know it. I think I'm discovering something about the story. I'm just working in service of the story, the characters, the language. You know, to the extent that one discovers oneself, one discovers the limitations of oneself in trying to write this story. But it's not about me. Now, there may be a lot of me in there, but I'm not making that the project, so I'm not paying attention. So the most alarming thing I discover is how limited my vocabulary is. Things like that, how I can't come up with the right word, and you discover all the bad things about yourself as a writer. So sorry.
I have seen that you like to write quite a bit about imperiled children, and I'm thinking of the baby's diaper and people like that, and the car accident and a gate at the stairs, the boy with cystic fibrosis. And I was wondering what draws you to this subject, and if you think it's going to be a lifelong interest of yours or something you're just doing now.
Oh, I'm just a sick person. I don't know. It does seem like a kind of mental illness, doesn't it? But I do think if you look at literature, the great fear of losing a child or the death of a child is a theme everywhere. It's everywhere in literature because it's everywhere in life. It's the worst thing that can happen to you, to lose a child. That's just the worst thing. So when you're trying to sort of think about sad stories or stories where people have to confront extreme things. I mean, writers are sort of stalking horses. You know, they go out and test the edges of madness and grief and death and come back to tell the tale, if they can. And so, you know, they're led out to these extreme experiences. Not that I haven't had some of them myself, but you know, it's something that historically writers have always gone to imagine and to try to bring back to the people who haven't had those experiences, you know, what that means. That doesn't answer the question very well. See, I'm up against the limitations of myself.
Well, you use that metaphor in people like that of the writer going out and seeing grief and madness and flailing and feeling inarticulate.
I did? I used that already?
Yeah, you did. And then finding a way to put it into words.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's in that little thing about the trip, right? The writer takes a trip and then comes back and tries to tell the tale of the trip. And that's where the narrator comes in, because the writer can't really do it. So the narrator actually tells the tale rather than the person who had the experience. I was trying to get it into some differentiation between story, fact, narrator, author in that section of the story. not everything that I write has an imperiled child in it, but there.
Lately.
Yeah, but there are a number of examples. It's true. I'm working on something right now that has no children in it at all, so none of them are imperiled. So we'll see. Thank you.
So the conversation today began when you were 19, but I'm wondering what happened before then and why you started writing, and why, mainly my question is why you decided to submit that to 17. Why not keep it something personal and sacred to you? What was the point where you decided to send it out into the world? What was that moment like when you decided you wanted to be seen?
Well, I was just a shy girl in a small town in the Adirondacks, and I wanted to win that 17 magazine contest, but I thought I wanted to win the art contest, and I had never had the nerve to send out anything. And the clock was ticking on that contest. You had to be a teenager. So I think I sent it out at the very last moment. I think I was 18 or 19. But I thought I'll send the story, because I had taken a creative writing class and I had a story. I actually sent them 2 stories, and I always thought it was the other story that had won, because I liked that one better, but they decided it was too edgy or something, so they printed the one they did and called that the winner. I don't know where I came up with that idea, but there was another story I'd written that I thought was really good, but it had some violence in it and whatever. I don't know what happened to that story. I won't send it to you, don't worry.
I'd love to read it. I didn't find that one online.
No, it disappeared into the offices of 17 magazine.
But I think the question is that at what point did you actually think of yourself as someone who was going to be a writer, as a real thing, as a profession?
Well, that was later. It wasn't the
then.
17 thing. But of course, the 17 thing, is the beginning of something. Obviously, I mean, obviously, I thought I'm going to stick this in an envelope and see what happens. And it was the first time I did that. But it was because of this crazy idea that I wanted to enter this contest. I don't know, just kids are weird. Kids are weird. And then it was only after I had graduated from college and was working here in New York that I really thought I wanted to try to commit myself to writing. I really missed it. I was working in an office. I missed the life of the artist and of the writer, and I wanted to do that. And I told myself I would take out a little loan to live off of. I was going up to Cornell. They paid the tuition, but I had a little loan. And I would give myself to the age of 30. I just arbitrarily, gave myself this permission. And that's all it is. It's arbitrarily giving yourself permission. But in order to do that, you have to have a tremendous feeling of desire to do it, because it costs you money, it costs you time, it costs you friends, it costs you family. Your mother won't speak to you for years. But you have to want to do that, and then you just give yourself permission. But I did have that sort of deadline at the end. I gave myself till I was 30. And then when I was 30, I had 2 books out already, so I got lucky. It all happened before I was 30. But I don't know what would have happened if I think I just would have stopped writing because of this artificial idea I gave. I mean, now when I look back, I think how absurd and how youthful to think that 30 was old and 30 was the end, and if you hadn't done it by 30, just find something new, But that's what I told myself. But I think that's what something like that has to happen for everybody, and you just figure it out on your own. It's kind of arbitrary, but it's permission. And that didn't happen for me until I was 23. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got 3
Okay.
years. So all right, thanks.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hello. You kind of already answered this with your last answer, but I recently graduated with a BFA in writing, and I'm kind of terrified. So I was wondering if you had any advice for someone who's like just...
What are you terrified of?
I'm afraid that now that I don't have to write, that I'm not going to be motivated to do so. At least in this past couple months, that's sort of been true. And I'm afraid that no one's going to like me. But
You can never write to be liked. That would just forget that project. That's
that was
just
that came out wrong. Sorry. I'm very
No,
nervous.
I mean, anyone can tell you that's just not going to happen. You're writing to create something that you think is beautiful and true and interesting, and that the world needs to hear a little of. A BFA is fine. Don't be frightened. It's no worse than a BA. If you need, it sounds like you're afraid of missing the structure of the classes that you took.
Yeah, I am. I'm also afraid because I've kind of like lost that safety net that I had because all of my classmates had to move to different places, and that's kind of. I mean, we still talk like.
You can still, you
Yeah.
know, there are lots of like little writing classes that you can just enroll in. I did that when I was working in a law firm here after college because I was afraid of missing the classroom situation, and I would just find a little class at night at the new school, and I would enroll in that, and you know, it keeps the discipline. If you need that kind of discipline and structure and audience to keep you going, it's helpful. There are a lot of little groups like that, little workshops. That's really what workshops are for that. So you'll find some, and then you can go off to graduate school as well if you want to continue that. And then by the time you don't, okay.
I'm nothing
That's
against
fine.
it. I just don't want to go.
Oh, that's fine. It's not a problem. But you can find a way of balancing your life where you are working to pay the rent. Always have another plan for rent paying. Don't make writing the way you're going to pay the rent because... Pardon?
Got a job, so that's good.
All right.
Yay.
All right. And you're young and energetic, and you can write and work at the same time. You have no children, right?
No.
All right. You're set. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for the many hours of pleasure reading your work. It's been wonderful.
A voice from the shadows. Yes. So nice.
I'm intrigued by your attraction to Canadian writing. I'm an American living in Canada, and I just wondered, you're the voice of American women in a lot of fiction. What is your attraction to Canadian writers? I'm not surprised by it, but I'm just interested to know why.
I don't know. It might be genetic. I'm a quarter Canadian, French Canadian. I don't
Madison
know.
is almost Canada.
Yes.
Well, in fact, I went to college at the first university that had a Canadian Studies program, and we sang not only the Star Spangled Banner, but "O Canada." You know and it was 30 minutes from the border.
That's what you should be saying.
"O Canada," instead of "Black Woman." I don't know. I just. I don't know.
Is there a difference in voice between an American
No,
writer?
I don't think so.
No?
There are a lot of American writers I also love. So I just happened arbitrarily to sort of, because she mentioned Alice Munro. But I mean, Alice Munro's voice is. Would you describe her voice as a Canadian voice? Well, how would you say it's Canadian literature? I mean, it is. It is.
She's often grappling with Canadian life, but she's the standout within it. Her characters are the rebels within it. So who knows? I don't know
Margaret Atwood, in her earlier work, was very seriously taking Canada on as a political subject and America as the enemy, and trying to do that. Now the enemies are larger, and it's her stage is larger. I don't know, and of course, Michael Ondaatje came, via Sri Lanka and England to Canada. I don't know. I think those were the writers that. They're just three stellar writers who just came to mind. There are also a lot of American writers I like as well, but maybe there's I don't feel there's a Canadian difference in them. Do you? Not really. But maybe I would be really naive and wrong to assert that too strongly. I don't know.
Okay, after reading Stairs, I have to ask you one very quick question. Did you ever play bass?
No.
Michelle and Degia cello?
Could you tell?
No, I was
niece
convinced
plays
that you
bass.
were actually a bass player.
I wish. My niece plays bass. She's
Okay.
a really great bass player, and I know a bass player in Madison, and I consulted with him. But my British editor in England plays bass, and I said to her, Hannah, could you tell I couldn't? She said, no, I thought you played bass. She said, I thought.
I was convinced.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you
Good
very
work.
much.
Hi, so I'm an MFA student, so I'm going to ask something very technical and very annoying. But I wanted to say thank you. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of SelfHelp. I love the essays. How to Talk to Your Mother, How to Be the Other Woman. I mean, they are amazing, amazing essays. And my question is actually about a certain moment in The Gate at the Stairs. And there's a moment where the main character jumps into the coffin of her brother. And I'm wondering...
Spoiler alert.
Sorry if I'm ruining it for basically everybody, which I probably am. But I'm wondering, what drives you when you're writing your plot? Is it technical? Is it emotional? I mean, I'm sure it's a combination of both, but what is the overriding factor? Because I'm guessing, I mean, that is such a huge moment, and I'm guessing that, I'm sort of guessing that it's not possible for somebody to jump into the coffin of her brother and kind of be in that space. And I'm wondering what you thought of. What did you think when you were writing? Really? I mean, what did you think? Because for me, I bought it. I was like, yes, this is what the character needs to do. But when I was thinking of it technically, I said, how the heck could that be possible? How could somebody do that? But at that point, I didn't even care. So I'm wondering, as a writer, what do you do?
Well, as I was imagining the scene, I just kept imagining. I first was focused on the father and what he would say, and then the father sort of leaving with the mother. And then I suddenly had the whole church leaving, including the organist. I thought, well, that really wouldn't happen, but this is how I'm imagining it, so she's alone. And then I just knew she would go up there. I was just following her, the way I imagined her. I knew she would go up there, and I knew she would try to sneak a peek. And then no one was there, of course, which wouldn't, again, probably wouldn't really happen in real life. But I just imagined her just going in and just being with him, because she was very close to him. She was very close to him.
Yeah, it felt right.
Yeah.
It felt like the right thing for her to do.
I just followed my imagination of her.
Yeah, cool.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I live in Seattle, and we read because basically November through May, it's rather scary to go outside and do anything else. But I'd love to know, Lorrie, why do you think it's important currently that we read? Why is it important to U.S. culture that we're reading? And it's wonderful always to see how many people turn out for the New Yorker Festival. I love coming out to this coast for it. Curious to know your thoughts.
Why is it important? that we read. It's important to get language that isn't commercially mediated, and increasingly we don't have that. It's important to sort of get close to another person's imagination, which language can lead us to, and to spend time in this really distilled and intimate way that a book can bring, especially a novel. And it's important just for expanding your horizons and learning things. It's as simple as that. Both emotional knowledge and just knowledge of the world. I sometimes think, is reading a book itself of value? I mean, it doesn't matter what book as long as you're reading a book, and I go either way on that. Sometimes I think, no, it doesn't matter. If it's a bad book, don't read it. It's not valuable because it's a book. It would be better to spend time watching a good movie. But a good book is of value in the way that I said, in terms of the language, the expression of preserving a language that is communicating both on an emotional and an intellectual level, and in service of a mind that is observing the world and telling us something interesting about it. Most language that we encounter is trying to sell us something. And that's really unfortunate. And it degrades the language, and it degrades encounters with language. But fiction writers presumably are not doing that. Although they're out there trying, their publishers send them out there to tell you, to get them to try to sell their books. But so there's the commercial problem. But actually, on my book tour, I would tell people not to buy the book. I'm sorry to be going like this, but the light is coming in, and so it's completely dark if I don't do this. So I don't really mean to be saluting you like a demented person.
That's okay. I like a salute. Thank you.
Go ahead.
A couple of years back, I was at the New Yorker Festival, and Deborah was talking to Alice Munro, and the subject of that night seemed to focus on motherhood. And she talked about how she was really prolific with her writing when her children were really young, and she would get up early in the morning to write. And I recently heard Barbara Kingsolver talk about that too, how she has to balance family and being a writer, and how during the day she shuts herself in her room, and then around 6 or 7 she has to go downstairs, say goodbye to her characters, and be a normal mom, a normal wife, and be like, how was everyone else's day? And so I'm wondering how you balance all of that. And if you could talk a little bit about the early years when you had a baby and how you managed to find time to keep writing through that, and then even now, just having a teenager, what that's like, and being a writer too.
It's all a struggle. I am not just a working mother. I'm a single working mother, and it's just all a struggle. And I don't. But thank you for acknowledging the situation. I mean, both men and women have it. I mean, I know single working dads who are also trying to write novels. It's not just women, but it's really hard. There's no easy answer. You just do the best you can. You have to, somebody said the thing about terrorist groups that make them survive is that they can improvise. If you thwart them in one direction, they can find a way to improvise, and that's really how you have to think. You have to think like Osama bin Laden, and you have to be a kind of terrorist. I mean, you have to just be so determined, and when you hit that, you'll improvise over here. Not that we should. At any rate, that's the downside of being a writer. It's not something to be. It's not something to be praised. Because it's sort of a ruthless kind of determination that you have to have, and it's not attractive. It's not pretty. It creates all kinds of guilt feelings in parents, which will never go away. And Alice Munro is still writing about her guilt feelings.
Alice had this great memory of being at the typewriter and batting her 2-year-old's hands away.
I know. And, you'll never forget that. It feels, it's hard. You just do, it's what I tell my son, just do the best you can, That's all you can do, just do the best you can and know when to forgive yourself and know when not to. Know when to push yourself a little more. But it is very hard to balance all things. I think people who know that they don't want to have children and don't have children are in a better place artistically, writing-wise, in terms of the life. Children will always take priority over your work. They just will. So it's really hard to balance. But if you're a ruthless, improvising terrorist type, you can do it.
It's time for our last question, and here's our last question.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay, I'm also an MFA student, so these are kind of technical. Sarah Lawrence, first year fiction. Yeah. And so I was wondering kind of two things. I wanted to know how you know when you have finished a short story and you're ready to just kind of put it out there and move on. And then my second question was just, maybe for you it's more in regards to an editor, but I was wondering how you, once you've shown your work to other people and they have a different take on it, or they think that your character should be doing different things, or they want to, they have ideas for changes, how you know when you think it's something that is appropriate as well, so that your sensibilities as an artist are still intact, versus when maybe you feel like you need to please the other people who are reading it, or if you even deal with that question.
What's the last part of the question again? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's kind of like sorting through different feedback and figuring out how to know what applies to your work and what applies to your vision.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're feeling this already as an MFA student, that some people's criticism may be eloquent and beautiful and intimidating, and deep down inside you just think it's wrong. You just think they're wrong. But that's part of what the MFA workshop will sort of build in you. It builds a tough skin. It causes you to sort things out. But some things will come through and you'll think, that's interesting and that's right. And you should pay attention to those. But that's part of the writing process and the life of a writer that you start to do alone at the desk as well. You bring your own critical faculties to your work and you say, am I being too hard on myself here, or is this paragraph really lousy? And you start to figure all that out. You never get it perfect. You just don't. Everything comes out a little less than it should be, but you just keep. So knowing when it's done, you always think it's done, and then you look at it again and realize it's not. So you just keep, at some point you have to abandon it and move on to your next story. I would say do not keep working on things that have already been published by the New Yorker.
When that happens.
Because I know writers who have done that, actually. Don't do that. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Lorrie.